want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here today on what I think is our sixth webinar so far. And Niamh has been kind enough to give us her time to talk about building trustworthy AI for healthcare innovation. And Niamh's been spent a lot of time working in this space recently. She has recently published a paper, which there'll be links to available at the end as well. And, you know, I get a sense that there is fear around AI. And when I say fear, I mean that there's fear of how to regulate it, how to use it, what is it, and there's also I feel a little bit of fatigue coming in. Like, we've been talking about AI for so long, I can't listen to another word about AI. And I just think that you've got a really good practical approach to this, Niamh, and that you'll be able to, you know, shed some light on certain subjects and really help people who are working in the quality and regulatory space to understand how they can apply this to either a product they're currently working on or one that might be coming down the line in future. So without further ado, Niamh, I would love you to take over and bring everyone through today's presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Katie. And I hadn't planned on saying this, but the work you're doing too is superb. You know, it's very valuable. We need to upskill, and you'll see that through this presentation as well. So I love working with you and knowing that you're there. But my work for the past couple of years has been on trustworthy AI in healthcare. My background, I've been in IT in healthcare for the past 30 years. I know I'm far too young, but we won't pass judgment on that. My first degree was I graduated with a degree in AI in 1998. I was a mature student even then, so don't go calculating. But it really interested me. I thought it was amazing. And then I returned back to Ireland, and a lot of people hadn't heard of it. So it was one of those down troughs of the AI era, where it came up and went back down, you know, with people hoping it would deliver. And I get a sense that maybe some people are starting to think, you know, maybe AI won't deliver this time, but the truth is it's already delivering. Maybe not all the bells and whistles with the hype, but it is delivering. So let's have a look at that. I'm doing a PhD with DKIT, also under UCD. They will be, it's a collaboration project, I guess, for trustworthy AI, and it's a wonderful project. So working with amazing people in all parts of the country, which I'm absolutely loving. So let's get into it. So I've just highlighted there that AI is transforming healthcare, but it has the potential to transform it even further. It started in diagnostics predominantly because we had lots of data already in diagnostics. So as of last year, there was 77% of the AI devices that were released in the US under the FDA website. They have their transparent database of AI devices that they've approved or accepted. 77% of them were in the diagnostic space, and that's because, as I say, there are lots of images available, so people could tap into the imaging that was freely available, not so much freely available. There's more open source, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you know, images that are held in companies and in hospitals. So a prime area for the taking. But there's other areas. I mean, there's all the drug. We're not talking about the drug area. We're talking specifically here medical device, but there's huge opportunity in terms of clinical outcomes, personalized treatments, and we are seeing applications. There was one I was looking at, I have on my phone, called AIDA. It's an LLM, so that's a large language model. There's so many different examples. We don't really have time to go into them here, but if you have specific questions, please feel free to share them, and we can try to get through some. This new era that was challenging enough with SAMD. It's not that long ago that Katie and I were working on training for SAMD software as a medical device. And here on top, we have AI. So there are key challenges impacting patient safety, impacting regulations, impacting your jobs if you're in the quality reg medical device space. there was and is a lack of regulatory standards. That is definitely evolving, that is shooting up, but it takes a long time to get the work through the cycle. So there's standards emerging, and if anyone wants information, I haven't got the list here, but actually there's a list in one of my papers that's at the back of this presentation that's referenced there. And there's an open source link as well, so you can simply access without paying for the papers. I work on a number of these standards, including the 62304. So if any of you are working in software, you'll be aware that 62304, IEC 62304 is the Software Development Lifecycle Standard. And when I spoke to organizations, they said, well, we haven't updated our procedures because 62304 hasn't changed. There's no AI in 62304, so why would we? And that's perfectly acceptable, because companies are often afraid to move forward. Yes, the innovation continues. Yes, the R&D continues, but the procedures don't often change until they have a decent guidance or standard to follow in order to meet the expectations from the regulatory. I have people sending me chat messages right now saying, where's the webinar, what webinar? So they'll have to get on to you, Katie. Sorry about that, I digress. So the regulatory standards, there's lots there, but a lot more to come. We do have an urgent need for developers, and I on purpose didn't write AI developers, software developers, full stack developers. A lot of young folk, I've heard anecdotal stories about people leaving their degrees, their software development degrees, because they think AI is going to do it all. I assure you, AI is not going to do it all. We need experts. We need the people to be able to develop. I was doing a project only a couple of weeks ago, and AI was writing the code, but it was making a hames of it. And that was polite. It was really, so I really needed to go back to basics and just start again. If you don't have the knowledge, you won't build a successful application. Yes, you will be aided, just like any assistant. If you bring in a junior assistant into your organization and they have absolutely no prior knowledge, that's your AI assistant right now. Yes, it's getting smarter, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of prompts and guardrails and support in order for AI to deliver. As an expert assistant, I definitely wouldn't be calling it that just yet. So let's move in. When we talk about trustworthy AI, the first thing I asked was, because I have a degree also in organizational psychology, and trust, to me is a psychological construct that, how do we put our hands around trustworthy? So I did a lot of research on what is trust. Trust, there's different types of trust, but it is a social perception. It is influenced by context. It depends on the stakes, high stakes. It depends on stakeholders. It's a fluid thing. So if something doesn't work, if your car doesn't work routinely, you're not going to trust that it's going to get you to work. It's as simple as that. But then how do we turn that concept into something that we can actually use in medical device development? I started with looking at ethics, because that word was being bandied about, and there was a really nice guidance from the European Commission on ethical guidelines, and they had 3 pillars that I'll talk to in a moment. It's important to consider then the limitations of these. What are the existing frameworks that we can work to? The 3 pillars that the ethics guideline, it was so high level, it wasn't written for medical devices, it wasn't written for software development. So I thought it was necessary to get ahead of this, because these devices were already being placed on the market. So my research and the project's research is focused on integrating these ethical values into AIEMD, so that is AI-enabled medical devices, or indeed sometimes I refer to AI-enabled health software, because I don't know if some of you are aware, but 62304 is changing the terminology in it from medical devices to health software, because it's broadening its scope. So in order to do this, I performed a systematic research review, and that gave rise to my first paper, which you'll find in the references. I wanted to look at the existing literature, ensure that I was able to come up with a really nice solution that wasn't reinventing the wheel. But when I went out there, I found that there wasn't too much in the space at all. So I looked at, for instance, 3,900 studies, selected the relevant ones, narrowed it down to 43, looked at all the regulatory frameworks around the world, and you know, have been part now of the emerging frameworks, which has really been a wonderful opportunity for me, I guess. I mentioned the 3 pillars, and I said I'd come back to it. So when the ethics guideline by the EU Commission was released, it had lawfulness first, and then ethics, and then robustness. And I kind of thought, well, you know what, lawfulness, does that really come first? In my opinion, it didn't. In my opinion, the ethics came first, because the ethics are our values, the things we believe in, you know, our belief system. They're what's important to us. And then in order to drive them home and be consistent and ensure everyone holds those true, we prescribe law. So for me, it was very important that I developed a framework that had ethics that shaped the law, that I don't personally have too much leeway in, or I shouldn't say leeway, too much voice on. It's already delivered, isn't it? We have the AI Act. In the US, we had the executive order, but that was pulled in the current administration. But there are still organizations like the FDA working towards really nice frameworks and trying to help us move forward. But then comes robustness. What is robustness? Again, it's another term that can be bandied about. So it was important for me that I put some shape around that and help people to understand, well, what do they actually need to deliver within that. So I came up with the ethics, lawfulness and robustness ELR model, and it's only the starting point, I guess, for a framework of ELR. So here we can see some of the ethics. I don't know if all of you are aware, but for instance, in the clinical data standard or clinical evaluation standard, the 14155, it mentions the Declaration of Helsinki. However, we have many other declarations that list out and prescribe what ethics and values that we pertain to, that we try to subscribe to, including fundamental rights, dignity, equality. I don't need to go through them. You can see them all there for yourself. But you may have heard a lot about diversity because of the issues with data and things like that in relation to AI. But they're there, and they do shape the laws that we have created. For instance, you'll see the Cybersecurity Act, the Data Act, EU AI Act, which is very pertinent for today. But no less, the other ones are just as important. Human fundamental rights, interoperability, more recently, the Accessibility Act. And of course, the MDR and the IVDR. And then, of course, we have the guidance and standards. And in order to be consistent in how we produce these things towards robustness, we generate our standards that help us achieve that. So I guess this is the start of the framework. And I think it's quite important because a lot of people didn't know how to represent ethics within their framework or within their organizations for software development. And this shows how those can be represented and where they come from, what they mean. So in terms of a unified, trustworthy AI framework then aimed at delivering excellence, we needed to go a little bit further. I needed to go a little bit further. There was the ELR, as I've just shown you, but also the AIDL. Apologies for the abbreviations. Anyone in medical device will be well used to them, but at least they're spelt out throughout the presentation. So the AI Development Lifecycle, and then we have the AI Change Management System. These are necessary in order to drill down, I suppose, and really deliver on what we aim to deliver, like the ethics and values that we subscribe to. So if we get into the AI development lifecycle, this is just one AI development lifecycle. It's the one that I published, but it is reflective of others that have now emerged. We start with AI planning and design, where you define your AI requirements and your design architecture, what you need, where you're going to, where is your starting point, where you're going to get your information from, or what technologies you're going to use. You have to build in data engineering. You need to collect the right data. It's a big issue. Do you have enough data to be able to train an AI system? So if not, where do you get it from? Do you augment? How do you manage that through its life cycle? And how do you make it, comply with GDPR? In other words, do you anonymize it? You might be dealing with images. There's a whole array of questions you need to be asking there. So you build your model and you tune it, and there are whole different techniques involved in doing that. You go into, of course, verification and validation. There's a lot of confusion over the term validation. If anyone has questions, we can get into it, but there is a school of thought that suggests maybe try not to use validation when you're talking about AI, because it can mean different things to different people. To an AI developer, for instance, cross-validation is a very different thing. It's part of tuning. It's a very different thing than validation of what we know in terms of meeting user needs. And so just be aware of that nuance, I guess. So deployment then, how you integrate your AI models into your existing medical device, and how you deploy it, how you make it available in the clinics, how you get the clinical opinion, whether it's clinical studies or not. And then, of course, ongoing maintenance and monitoring. As part of the AI Act, of course, you have to monitor your devices. There was, in my opinion, some confusion, I guess. A lot of people believed that having a locked algorithm meant that the AI device could be treated a little bit like a traditional software medical device. And in my opinion, based on my research, that is not the case. AI locked models are also subject to degradation and need to be monitored. Yeah, there's a lot I could say there, but in 1 hour, I'm afraid we probably won't get to it unless there are specific questions, as I said. So this is an overview of an AI development lifecycle within the SDLC. So you can see here we have the software development lifecycle typical of IEC 62304. We have software development planning, requirements analysis, architectural design, implementation, integration, testing, and release. So then the question is, or the question was at least, if 62304 is being updated, which it is, to include AI requirements, there was a concern, are we going to replace the existing and integrate AI into it, into this existing life cycle? And the answer is no, because the two really can, yes, they are integrated at certain points, but it's up to the organization to define at what points they integrate. Similar in a way to how usability engineering has its own life cycle. Risk management has its own life cycle. Clinical evaluation has its own life cycle. So in the same way, AI development life cycle and AI data management life cycle, it also, yes, there are integration points, but the companies themselves should be responsible for defining at what points they meet, if you like, and design reviews are a good opportunity for that. This just shows you, I guess, that when you will need your software development lifecycle with your AI development lifecycle, because AI doesn't happen in isolation. There is coding, there is software development. All of the components that were there before are still there. They don't get wiped off the slate, so it's very important to consider that. But then they will have additional aspects, such as the AI risk management. And we now have 24971-2, which is guidance on AI risks and how to include them in your process. interpretability, explainability, transparency, and traceability. We've always had traceability, but some of these ones are a little bit specific to AI. How do you interpret, or how does the clinician interpret the results, and how does the patient interpret the output? If you have, for instance, if you did download one of those clinical diagnostic apps, is it clear that there's been no human in the loop, that it's an algorithm, that it's giving you a probability based on the existing data? How do you know that? How can you understand the data that's being presented, and is it clear? So all of those things need to be considered in the development life cycle, so that you don't confuse people and you don't confuse clinicians, and indeed you don't allow people to mistrust and overtrust. It's all part of the trustworthy life cycle, I guess. So configuration management was always there, but it'll be even more challenging, I guess, with AI and all the tools, more so because how do you configuration manage data? That'll be a little bit challenging, but it's possible. It's just more work. So configuration management, for anyone that doesn't know, is version control of not just software, but of your documentation, of your data, of how you're tracking it, how you can recreate it. If you did have an issue in the market, can you recreate the same technology with open source applications, with API applications, with whatever it was that the person used and found a failure? Can you recreate that? Configuration management, if it was done properly, should allow that. So we'll move on from there. It's a whole area in itself. Problem resolution and change management. AI continuous monitoring and notification. My PhD is moving into change management. So the next slide, one after this, goes in a little bit further into that. And this one, AI change management, you can see the AICM model and performance measures. So the next slide is talking about the performance measures in a little bit more detail. But here at a higher level, we can see that performance measures for AI is absolutely critical. You can see if you download research papers or you look through the websites and you see we have 98% accuracy for this model. We have 95% accuracy for another model. And we think, great, it works, it's amazing. And then we compare it to a clinician who might be 92% accurate because they might be tired from a 36-hour shift or whatever the case may be. So often when you try to recreate those studies, it's very difficult to recreate that accuracy measurement. And the reason is because when you're given a measure of 95% accurate, how do we know that they haven't taken the best one that they could possibly take and show us the best one at a point in time? If you retrain and retrain and retrain, and an analogy I gave relatively recently when I was trying to describe this was, when you draw pictures when you're in school, maybe, dare I say, I was a little bit bored in some classes, not all of them, but I'd be drawing pictures and I'd get very good at drawing a certain type of picture. It might be Snoopy, it might be an eye, a face, whatever it might be. And you could get very, very, very good indeed, because you're sitting there for a number of years, aren't you, in school when you're young? And you can perfect your little picture, but you've overlearned, you've overtrained on drawing that one picture. I wouldn't be very good at drawing another picture, let's say, that, someone else told me, draw a truck. And I go, oh my goodness, I have to start from scratch. I'm not sure. The point here is that how good is your device when it is used in public, when it is used in different scenarios, in different clinics, in different, with different populations, with different people from ethnic backgrounds, people of different ages, people with different health conditions, personalized conditions, with different things impacting them. So just be careful about your metrics. So you then have to define what metrics are you going to use in order to help you to define or to measure your device when you go out. So the next slide helps you a little bit in that. There are a number of metrics. You can't just choose accuracy on its own. If you know anything about accuracy, it works hand in hand with precision. You can be accurate but not precise, and vice versa. Sensitivity and specificity is another measurement. How sensitive are you and how specific are you? So if I throw a dart, will I get the area at all? Will I get the same area each time? How repeatable are you? The recall is another way of talking about sensitivity. So ROC, area under the curve, or AUC is area under the curve, but they help us diagrammatically. They help us to visualize our data, but they are only a sample of data. That data needs to be monitored in post-market, which is on the right of the screen there, continuous post-market monitoring. So what are you going to monitor when you're in real world conditions? Are you going to just look at accuracy and say, yes, I'm fine? That'd be a big mistake. So you have to have rationales for how you do that. And there's a standard coming called performance evaluation. It doesn't at the moment deal with continuous post-market monitoring, but they're the kinds of things that you should be, if you're developing right now, you should be building in methods for monitoring those performance measures. So that's coding, that's software development. Again, that's not stuff that you learn in an AI course, or AI will necessarily do well for you. So we need to upskill. We need to keep going. So reg compliance requirements, aligning with the reg standards. As I mentioned there's performance metrics. There's also another one, 63450, that's coming. Test method validation, verification and validation test methods. But it's not going to give you all the answers, so I guess that's why I thought this work was very important. So the change management, I said that's an area that I find vitally important, and I believe my work will contribute significantly to it over the next year. I'm going to get further into it. So change management and transparency. How do you identify what is changing? How do you monitor that? How do you capture it? How do you assess the impact? And who do you tell? When do you tell? All of those questions need to be answered. Here you can see I made reference to the next slide. This was where I started off. This is a snapshot from my paper. You can see here pre-market AI performance requirements: accuracy, sensitivity, specificity, precision. So it goes on down. But there are different ones for different. If you have regression, I don't know if you're aware of regression analysis and correlation analysis. They're different statistical methods for identifying a relationship between something. What's the relationship between cooking a good pizza and the amount of time you leave it in the oven at 10 degrees? You're not going to get a very good pizza at 10 degrees. So what are the relationships? You need to use the right metric to measure your data. It's as simple as that. So you can't just say, well, we have accuracy, which I do hear a lot of people doing, and it drives me a little bit nuts. So you can see here the point being that in the post-market phase, you need to maintain the performance monitoring plan and assess, as it says down here, provide adequate rationale for the selection of performance requirements relevant to the device type, and create a feedback loop so that you can monitor your change and assess changes as they're occurring real time. This is a bit busy, so don't get lost in it. It was just to give you a snapshot view of a piece of work I was doing in a real company, I shouldn't say a real company, should I? But in a real company as opposed to research, so I have developed this as part of my research, but for a company who is developing an amazing AI device in relation to cognitive deficit, so measuring cognitive deficit. And I'm very fortunate. MemoryTel is the company, and Karina Grimes is the CEO, an amazing lady, trying to bring that device to market. So this is something I developed for her to pull into the software development plan in order that they have a framework to be able to develop both the software. So you can see there the software development lifecycle in the blue in the middle. This is the AI development lifecycle up in the top with the AI data management also. And it just shows you the risk management lifecycle a little bit and the AI change management lifecycle. I appreciate that there are more, that there are usability requirements outside of this, but this was just a representation showing how design control is still very relevant because there are regulations that we must comply with, but they link in then with other life cycles. And again, it's up to you where they dovetail and where they meet. So this was just one example I thought might be nice to show you, and happy to take questions on it. So for me then, my aim was to bridge AI reg and plug the gaps, plug ethical gaps, as well as develop a trustworthy framework based on all the insights I could from existing research, from new devices, from all my years' experience in software development and medical devices. We do have a widespread lack of understanding of AI specific reg requirements. And it's not surprising because it's so new. That's, we're all still learning together, I guess. That upskilling is so vitally important, and it's wonderful how organizations are taking AI, putting their arms around it and bringing it into their organizations, because the more we use it, the more comfortable and the more we will understand its limitations, which is so important. I used to say, and still do say, that AI right now is a numbers game. It is statistics. It's probability or whatever stats it's using in order to, when a sentence is created in your predictive text or ChatGPT style, it knows the rules of language. It knows the rules of the English language or of other languages, and based on probability predicts the next word to enter. So you can see very clearly then that it'll get things wrong. Okay. That little chat there is not for me, is it, Katie? If it is, no. Okay.
No, it's not for you. I'll let you know if anything's for you, my dear. I'll keep my eye open.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on here because I have another nice little one last thing, or one last topic, I suppose, to share with you after this bit. Most quality management systems remain outdated at the moment, but they will be updated, of course. And I hope this presentation helps organizations to start to update them. There will be limited information coming in 62304. I'm leading the AI sub-team on that. And in the same way that we have referred to SOUP, we will be referring to AI in 62304, because there was very strong feedback that people did not want their SDLC, their software development lifecycle standard, to turn into an AI development lifecycle standard. They want, it still remains SDLC, but at certain points it makes reference to including AI, and then there's an annex that I drafted originally, and we're working through to try to bring some key information like this, to companies. But really, you'll rely on the additional standards that will be released in 2027, 2028 timeframe, and have started. The PAS, the data management one, a PAS, it's a publicly accessible specification, I believe it's called, which is why we refer to it as a PAS. That is out right now. So that's a starting point for anyone. So I suppose just to summarize that, ensure you have an understanding of how you include your ethical values, and that you include protection of fundamental rights, whether it's into your risk management, of course, you might consider it there. But how do you ensure that those aspects are captured? And then ensure that you have comprehensive performance metrics. to accurately assess your system. Forgive my use of that word there, but I couldn't resist. So current post-market surveillance is limited to traditional complaint handling. At the moment, when I did my research, some research back in 2024 now, that was the research was suggesting that most companies were still very much heavily reliant on complaints, the traditional system for post-market monitoring of their AI, and that's a problem. Partly because of the issue that I mentioned, which was that they were reliant on this idea of a locked algorithm, which in my opinion, yes, the changes won't be as many, but it's not to say that you won't have changes in a locked algorithm, so you need to monitor it. Now, if anyone, there's a short quiz in here. If anyone wants to do it, it's only 6 questions long. Please pull out your phones and answer the short, very short multi-choice questions. There's only 6 of them. It's really to get an idea of what you understand by pre-trained models. So please don't wait until I get to the end to answer it if you're interested in doing this. It's a quiz that I'll be giving to others, so it'd be nice to give you guys the opportunity as well to answer some of these. And really, it's my hot potato right now. So pre-trained models, what people understand about them, and so forth. So I'll give you a second there if anyone's going to do that. Any thumbs up or anyone interested in doing this quiz?
Niamh, I've also popped in the chat, so if people
brilliant.
haven't got, I'll be with a thumbs up. If and a hands up too. If anyone can't access that through their phone using that QR code and want to do it through their computer, their browser, they can do so by clicking on the link that I popped in the chat as well. So 2 different ways to get in, depending on what you're more comfortable with. And I've had a look at it myself. I think there's only just 6 multiple choice questions, so it shouldn't take too long.
And I'm going to move on, but I assume if people are in there, they'll be ahead of me anyway, so not to worry. So, pre-trained models. Why have I jumped into this? I guess I want people to be aware of pre-trained models. What are they? I had a question not too long ago saying, someone said, what's a foundation model? And I explained that it was like ChatGPT, but there's a little bit more to it. And once you dig into it, you can see that there's a lot of pre-trained medical models available, both open source. I'm assuming that Lisa's hand up there is not a question. I'm assuming that's just, I'm going to doing the quiz.
It's still up, yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
That's fine. Thanks, Lisa. So, so medical pre-trained models, what are they? They're literally roughly trained on huge data sets, models that can come from anywhere, both open source and closed source. So you could buy them, or you can find them in places like GitHub, Hugging Face, in different software developer type places. So this is a list of some of them that are available. These are LLMs, so these are large language models. These are systems, you see the model names, BERT and BioBERT, BioGPT. So you can assume then, that the basis of it is GPT, but it's bio data behind it. BlueBERT, Clinical BERT, there's 2 there called Clinical BERT, but they're different, So if you say, I'm going to use Clinical BERT, you really need to know, well, which one and where has it come from, what data was there. There's a lot you need to understand if you're starting your AI development with a pre-trained model. Here are pre-trained vision models. So there are multimodal models as well, but I just, again, wanted to give you a snapshot of what's out there. So for instance, ImageNet is a database of, is it 12 million images, or is it 14 million images? I've blanked there. Well, it's either 12 or 14, not too different, right? So there's a lot of images there, and you can train an AI system on ImageNet and give it a name And then you can tweak the algorithm, or you can change how it captures the data, how it encodes the data, how it decodes the data. And I've given an image encoder there, but there's different algorithms you can use to do this. So it'll come out with it'll be pre-trained differently, is what I'm trying to say to you. So all things are not made equal is the message I'm trying to get across. You really need to understand, if you're opting for a pre-trained vision model or LLM model or multimodal model, whatever it might be, because we have right now, at least that I'm aware of, we have audio models, image and language models. So we have at least 3, and then we have, of course, the multi going across the different facets. So if we have all of these different types of models and we use them, we bring them into our development life cycle, and we say, well, it's pre-trained, so we don't need to do very much. We just slap on a few performance measures and sure, we'll see how it works. We'll test it in real life because we don't have very much data. That is happening. Or it could be that we're a very evolved organization. We might have lots and lots of medical images for a particular use case, and we might be able to continue training and continue modifying and tuning our AI model and testing to make sure that it works as we had intended it to work. So you can imagine then that there's a range of opportunities for new devices, but also a range of opportunities for challenge. Some might ask, what's the problem? Some might say that's just soup. If it is soup, how is that going to be handled? Soup, I don't know if you're a software developer and you deal with soup. Soup is software of unknown provenance. Soup is Java. If you're running a web-based application and you need Java to run your web, Java, whatever solution is available for download as an open source or as a bought application, that is soup. You don't know, you can't stand over the veracity of the testing that it underwent. So you are just, it's a tool you were required to use. So is that the same here for the pre-trained model? Maybe you don't have the data. So yes, it could be a soup. But if it is soup, are you going to treat it in the same way as any other soup? And why should you maybe treat it a little bit differently? Partly because there are a number of risks, not least security and privacy, bias, inequity, transparency, performance, technical suitability. With pre-training, I said, did I say that AI is not smart? AI is not smart yet. It can learn silly things. It'll learn whatever it's given. As I said, it's probability. It's predicting the structure of sentences. That's why it comes out with gibberish. That's why there's things called hallucinations. It's not really hallucinations. It's gibberish. And it's because it's putting the most likely sentence together based on what is in its repository already. So if ChatGPT is open to any amount of information, there's a lot of misinformation available too that it can learn. There's also a thing called catastrophic remembering, or forgetting, I should say. Catastrophic forgetting. When an AI model is trained, it forgets what it learned previously. And that might be a good thing depending on the quality of the data that it learned originally or not. You might be reliant on it. So it's about understanding the limitations and knowing what to do about them. So let's try and get through this quick because there's a lot of time gone already. What I'm trying to say here to you is that using pre-trained models is definitely what's happening in the market, and it is the way to go because, there's amazing opportunities from them, but evaluate them. Here, as you will see in my latest paper, I've put together a model checklist with various, this is just the category, but various questions to ask. And this is just one small snapshot of it. With security, for instance, if your pre-trained model is widely available, if it's already an open source application on the internet, how do you know someone hasn't put some malware into it, for instance? You know, how do you know that someone hasn't corrupted the data? It's called data poisoning. And I have a couple of slides here on what is data poisoning, but it's only one of the risks that pre-trained models are predisposed to or subject to. So I think this is one of the last slides. Data poisoning examples. I'm not just making it up. These are real issues. You can see here use of ChatGPT for legal citations. The outcome, incorrect filings due to poisoned or biased data sets. These are, you know, just real life examples, I suppose, just in case you think I'm making it up. So to summarize then, my aim is to try to bring together a unified trustworthy AI framework that addresses healthcare AI gaps, look at the limitations and make people aware of the limitations so that we can develop real solutions and not necessarily buy into the hype, but the real promises. This is a technology that doesn't need to go away. It can stay and we can build on it. I believed in it back in 1998 and a few people laughed at me, but I believed in it and here we are today making a difference. So a framework that will and can make an impact is what I'm trying to achieve. I think that's me. Here we go with some references. You can see the open source link here to DKIT. The pre-trained model one is pending, so hopefully before long that'll be on the market as well. That's me, guys.